Good morning. It's 11 a.m. Singapore time. Thank you so much, audiences, for being with us here today. Last count, last night, we had 200 over audiences who have signed up for this webinar, so we really appreciate your time. To kickstart this session, I'm Narita Cheah, the CEO of Paperspace Asia. And we're really thankful for you to joining us today to join our one of many Strategic Insight series. The agenda that we're trying to unpack over the next hour is really going to address 5 key topics, starting with our purpose. Why are we doing the strategic series? And then followed up by global CEO research that we've done. What is it telling us in terms of trends? And then really unpacking the 4 crucial trends that we've now spoken to really key thought leaders across the industry, summarizing then with the 3 key takeaways to accelerate performance. And naturally, we then keep the time open for any Q&As, so please keep them coming as the session runs. The purpose is always the beginning of the end, they say, the journey. You need to have a clarity on what you're trying to achieve. And I couldn't help but really go back to Stephen Covey's book on 7 habits of highly effective people. Post-pandemic, we're all so busy, and it's very easy to fall into just responding to what's urgent. And the question I have for audiences today is, are you spending time on what's important? Because that will dictate where the journey then takes you to the end. Based on our research and concerns with priorities and CEOs worldwide, there are 4 key trends that are emerging to determine the success of Asian businesses moving forward. As we move into 2023, CEOs are facing unprecedented level of uncertainty. The role of the leader is changing fast, and they need new strategies to navigate this new landscape. At this time last year, the Asia-Pacific optimism was at an all-time high for an economic recovery, in fact, growth. And fast forward 12 months later, a year on in 2023, we're seeing a reversal of this confidence. A complex series of challenges and are threatening growth opportunities in Asia-Pacific. McKinsey have identified what are the top 5 concerns that CEOs are proliferating. What are the things I need to really be thinking about today? Really things you need to also be having as top of your mind. They've identified that disruptive technology sits at the top, followed by the economy, geopolitics as the top 3 concerns. And naturally, the war of talent, the talent strategy continues to be, again, top of mind. And last but not least, the shifts in the way we work continues to then has the other 5th ball juggling on top of everything else. So as we circle back onto the first trend, what we're seeing is that the economic factors are obviously pointing towards a particular North Star. And really it's showing us that winter is coming. Same time last year, 69% of CEOs believed that the economic growth would be on a growth trajectory. And this year, 98%, well, to me that's almost all, CEOs expect a recession. Interest rates are rising. How has that impacted businesses? First, the risk of lower corporate revenues due to reduced consumer spending and tightening credit facilities. And that then leads to how do we deal with the continuous escalating inflation? And with the shifts of work, we're also seeing increasing vacancy rates in commercial offices globally. Are these signs of a recession? I should think so. So what are global CEOs doing about it, right? These are 4 things that you really need to consider. First, not surprising, deferring capital expenditures and investment projects, right? So we're really seeing this cloud of cost cautioning. Layoffs are extending far beyond big tech. So in the last 5 months, we've seen 500,000 jobs losses beyond the tech industry. And naturally, that has led to the downsizing and the relocation of office spaces. And this then brings back to the fourth point, which is then how then does the company need to revisit strategic initiatives to focus on growth opportunities and abandon unprofitable segments? What do you keep and what do you have to give away or toss? So starting our first session, we are so thankful and proud to have Mr. Tang join us as our first key speaker, Managing Director of Facilitate Corporation. Wycock has more than 25 years of expertise in corporate real estate, including a notable 5-year stint at Google Asia Pacific as their Director of Real Estate and Construction. So you see all those beautiful photos where people are like Instagramming the Google office, that's really credit to Wycock championing this very, very landmark project. He is presently the Director of Southeast Asia at Facilitate Corporation, where he oversees project strategy, delivery implementation with clients across Asia. So Wycock, with hybrid work normalizing, looming recession, and an increasing interest rates right now, the question I have for you is, what should Asian companies be doing with the commercial office space to reduce costs? What options are business leaders taking?
I guess hybrid is a buzzword for the last 2-3 years, right? All companies are hopping onto the bandwagon of introducing some form of hybrid. So what we are seeing across Asia, companies are trying to save costs, but on a varying degree. Some companies opt to let go of the physical office, 100% remote working. Right? That works for certain companies. And of course, there are some companies that go with a limited hybrid approach. These companies take the opportunities to introduce hybrid working elements, introducing collaboration spaces, introducing socialization spaces. So, in fact, leaders are using this opportunity to introduce a different work culture within the organization. And instead of just reducing the number of desks in correspondence to the number of headcount, they are actually maintaining or just reducing to a lesser degree to accommodate all these hybrid elements. And it works well for many of the companies that we work with. And of course, there are the third type of companies that resist hybrid working. They still insist of 100% coming back to office. And these companies are moving out of the CBD region to offices that are cheaper. So most of them are still looking at ways to reduce their costs in this economic climate.
Thank you, Wycock. And joining us is our second speaker, Sheela Parakkal, who is Group Head Leadership of People Development and Experience at Prudential Assurance. Sheela joins us under her newly promoted role as the Group Head Leadership of People Development and Experience at Prudential Assurance. Congratulations on this well-deserved new role, because this comes after her 8-year role as the company's CHRO. She is invaluable in leading the change of nurturing a value-based organization to their 14,000 employees to connect, grow, and succeed. So Sheela, the question of the day is, with a looming recession, what steps should forward-thinking Asian business leaders be taking from an HR perspective?
This is a million-dollar question, Narita, if I can be very honest. And I think a lot of leaders are responding to this in different ways. And the natural tendency for organizations and their leaders is whenever there's an indication of a recession, the first thing that everyone gets into is let's tighten our belts and let's deal with cost. I encourage the leaders in this call also to think about growth. Now, that's very counterintuitive in a recession, but where do you see maximum opportunity to grow? And where do you actually need to park your limited funds is definitely a very logical thing to do. But for all of this to work, I think leaders need to pay a lot of attention to, and I'm seeing this in a lot of leaders, is to communicate with a level of transparency to your people in the organization about your real challenges. And in fact, finding solutions with your people to be able to ride any wave in the business cycle is actually the smartest way to navigate through any period of challenge.
Thank you, Sheela. As we move on now to trend number 2, technology. McKinsey has stated that these are the top 3 technology trends that needs to be considered as well. So there's a lot to deal with on technology. We know it's the behemoth that we are like, which one should we unpack? Well, McKinsey says the first priority is developing advanced analytics. Second, how do you then enhance cybersecurity? And followed by the automation of work. In a recent article by NVIDIA's CEO, he says that those without AI expertise will be left behind. How many of you agree? I think I have to kind of concede now with ChatGPT as part of my team's general day-to-day. And I think that this is something that we sort of maybe thought about as a concept. We knew it was coming, and here it is today. So I think in addressing the technology questions, we then want to really sort of introduce our very timely third guest speaker, Mr. Osman Faiz, the CEO and CIO of AMTD Digital. Osman Faiz has over 25 years in the international banking industry, honing his craft at American Express and Standard Chartered Bank as its COO before transitioning into the fintech industry. So courageous to go from corporate banking to fintech, Osman. And today, he leads AMTD Digital in driving the company's regional banking initiatives and enhance to overall operational efficiencies. So, Osman, this is like the hot topics that we're hearing across the world right now. It's about tech, AI, and of course, ChatGPT. What are your views on this trend, and what should Asian business leaders be doing to prepare?
Very interesting question. If you Google today or go to YouTube, I think every second day you hear about AI, ChatGPT, and all those tools. There are a lot of benefits, as you can see, by using some of these tools and, at different sectors and industries, if I may say. Not just in my finance industry, but across the world, people are using. And as a result of that, we see productivity, we see efficiency. But at the same time, it also affects the unemployment, any repetitive job getting digitized. So I guess it's a process through which we are all going through. And at the same time, there is a huge discussions around this AI, which is around its ethical and social implications, which is a huge subject of debate, which I think is going to take a long time. I would also say that every industry and sectors, they're also grappling with how to collaborate and regulate. Because one way, if you over-regulate, then you kill the innovation. But if you don't regulate, then a lot of implications are there, the biases are there, there are scams that are taking place. So it's a very interesting time that we are going through, but obviously huge way forward. I think we are only seeing 10-15% of its real use case. there is another 80-90% that is going to come in next 10-15 years.
Thank you, Osman. So much to think about there. And I'd like to kind of maybe take this question over to Sheela as well. Now that AI and ChatGPT are reshaping job roles and responsibilities, Sheela, how has your organization approached the integration of technology and automation into HR processes, such as recruitment, performance management, or employee development?
I must say that I was very intrigued with the capabilities that ChatGPT has. And in fact, we used ChatGPT to distill through hundreds and thousands of comments in our recently concluded engagement survey. So there was an element of efficiency, which I think was profound. It then allowed the humans to then be able to focus on the analysis and the actions, not so much the synthesis. And I think through the process of experimenting with ChatGPT, what we discovered was it actually is quite fun to explore and work with new technology. But maybe where I said it's not quite yet ready to replace humans is a personal point of view. So organizationally, the use of AI has been there for a bit now. And I must say that we're still at a stage of awareness and exploration, specifically in the people space, where we've spoken about, the use of ChatGPT with the engagement survey, using AI to shortlist candidates for roles, using AI to ensure that we're using the right inclusive language when we're actually engaging with our potential employees, are just one or two little things that we've used. Scheduling interviews, using artificial intelligence, etc. It has been things that we've experimented with, but we've never quite scaled it up as much as its potential. Now, one of the first things that we did was to create this fear or diminish the fear around AI and anything that is new from a technology perspective by creating education platforms around what artificial intelligence is. And this is not something that we've done now. We started this journey a couple of years ago, like introducing AI in the context of domain expertise and not doing it by ourselves, but doing it through partnerships with institutes of higher education to essentially level the understanding that people have around what technology is, what innovative technology is, what can it do to improve quality of performance, and emphasizing that it's not here to replace you. So this is a journey not complete yet, Narita, because, the change is fast and furious, but it's definitely something that we see that we could leverage a lot more.
Thank you, Sheela. I think it's really comforting to know that humans still have a role to play in the world of work. And I think the key takeaways I got from that was it's about testing small, trying, seeing what it means, and then the next step for us to really think about is scaling. And as we sort of look towards the next article, it's really interesting because it talks about how CEO leadership in the digital transformation can tip the scales towards success. Today, the CEO's role is critical as a change agent because they recognize that the sector that they are in right now will be very different in the next few years. So in order to kind of address the future landscape, these initiatives have to start now. And I think the question is, yes, we know that. So what do we need to do? How do we start? And Singapore, being one of the leading countries driving Web3 and digital asset technology, I'd like to direct this question to Osman around really what is your view on how Singapore is positioning itself for Web3 and what should Asian companies be doing to prepare for digitalization of assets and cryptocurrencies?
On this particular areas, I will highlight some of the key points that one should always consider. The first is we must understand the potential. The business leaders should just educate themselves about those technologies, and more importantly, the potential implications of those applications, and how it have an impact on their industry. So once it helps them to identify those areas, it can really make the most value to the organization. That's what it is. The second is developing a strategy around it, because it's very crucial to align with your organization goals, because each organization has a different set of goals. So your strategy of that has to align with that goal, identifying specific use case, which I think is that's going to create value, or that will help you to prioritize some of them and allocate your resources accordingly. And third, I would emphasize on, which is absolutely crucial, which is about your data-driven culture. You may have a best strategy, a fantastic goal, and you understand the potential of it. But guess what? End of the day, it's the people. If they're not ready as a culture to play with data, then the things wouldn't move. So, and culture takes a lot of time and effort, and education is key to reskill and upskill them. So the culture needs to be a great focus. And last but not the least, investing on your talent and skill development. These are, I would say, very key when it comes to Asian business leaders to prepare and embrace this disruption that is coming through.
Thanks, Osman. And on that note, we then shift to trend number 3, workplace innovation. Well, according to The Economist, rethinking well-being will be the priority in thinking about talent strategy and organization performance. And here in Asia, employees have reported a higher burnout than their international counterparts. 40% of employees say their company is asking too much of them, higher than the global average of 37%. So why is that the case here in Asia? And there are some specific nuances that this research has sort of called out. First being the lack of unemployment safety across Asia. The second being a larger gender disparity in balancing domestic duties and work. And last but not least, in becoming more and more of a globalized sort of workforce, the longer working hours in multinationals to accommodate global working hours has really sort of caused this tension. I've been in the industry for 25 years and I've not seen as many people having to take 7 a.m. calls and 9 p.m. calls on a daily basis. I'm not sure where you sneak in the 8 hours in between all that, but I certainly couldn't do that daily. And so on that, Rosalind Quack, General Manager of Modern Work at Microsoft Asia, said that empathy will have to become the core for leaders to engage more authentically with their employees to navigate through these very, very nuanced, unique experiences. So with employee well-being, including issues like mental health and burnout being the top of mind in the recent years, I'd like to direct this question to Sheela on what is Prudential doing in Asia when it comes to employee well-being.
Honestly, top of mind for all leaders, as you said, this whole conversation around well-being. And one might say that different organizations approach this quite differently. And let me elaborate this a little bit. At a programmatic or initiative level, I think this is almost baseline across most organizations, and we are not different there. So at Prudential, we've about 200 certified mental health first aiders across the group, individuals who have leaned in to be trained to support their team members should they have any mental health well-being issues, etc. At Prudential Singapore, we run a well-being coaching program. So we have individuals who are equipped not just to deal with issues, but to encourage well-being as an ongoing conversation and narrative with their team members and the wider organization. And at a policy level, that's another play that a lot of organizations are looking at. And at Prudential, we're no different. And in fact, we're quite proud of this, where in Singapore, we've introduced the Reflect, Rejuvenate, and Recharge leave. Now, this is essentially a 2-month sabbatical for our people who have been with the organization for more than 5 years. Essentially, as the leave name implies, to take time off, recharge themselves, and come back with a renewed sense of purpose. Why is it so innovative? Well, 1 month of pay and another 50% paid, it's quite unheard of, sabbatical leave, which is paid. But if I now take a broader narrative on well-being, well-being is just not for the sake of, but essentially organizations need to link this to performance. And how do we then create an environment where people feel safe to speak about their mental health challenges, their own well-being? How do we create an environment or a workspace that allows people to rejuvenate and get energy from their work and workplace with their colleagues? Is actually an ongoing initiative here in Singapore, where we are committed to creating an environment where people feel safe showing up as themselves, have work that is meaningful, are empowered to generate themselves and create energy, doing all of that in a workplace that is conducive in addressing the needs of every employee.
Thanks, Sheela. I think you'll have to expect a flurry of applications right after this webinar, with obviously the recent programs that have been in place at Prudential. And shifting gears now and back onto the topic on technology again, The Economist had stated that, yes, technology provides our lifeline for the future in a time of crisis. But what is more important than that is not to overlook the pivotal role of people in building a culture that drives the transformation and creates that sustainability in the innovation in itself. And really, in the article by the World Economic Forum, 2 in 3 businesses believe that upskilling and reskilling their employees will ensure a return on investment in these activities within 1 year. That's a pretty good ROI. So I think if you're not on it, I think it's really time to reinvest in people. And so the question really is to Osman, right? All these ideas, we want to do initiatives, we've got to start. So when it comes to technological implementation, how can organizations empower employees to create a culture to drive innovation?
Again, a very, very relevant and very interesting question. I can only say what I've experienced. And as you said, I've been very blessed to work in many years in large corporations and then moving into a startup fintech. So as I said, that culture is key, right? Now, the leadership in one hand has to protect their existing revenue, which is their core. But then again, you have this change coming or transformation coming where you are embracing an innovative culture, disruptions to take place, and taking your employees ready for the next millennial or the next change that are coming. So it is more relevant now for leaders to have far more engagement with the employees, where you would see that it's not about just setting up an innovation center that delivers your innovation tomorrow. And I can tell you, coming from, again, many years of multinational experience, banks traditionally risk averse. We have been told, and we have conveyed that over years, to be SOP driven. Follow the book, follow the rule, which means you can't deviate from a given process and systems. How does it work when it comes to innovation? And I think we are already seeing that the organizations are partnering with other players, which are fintech or more disruptive, because the companies who are big, not that they don't have the intention, They have the intention, they have the muscle, which is the deep pockets, but they can't run as fast because the organizational framework, current environment does not allow them to run as fast. They have a legacy infrastructure, they have regulatory landscape, and they have a set of clients which are reasonably satisfied. That's why you see these collaborations, which I mentioned is key, to partner with third parties to help you come up with those things. It is not about setting up an innovation center with nice frills and logos and those bags and hammocks and all that. It has to come within the organization as a culture. And environment of safety is very important. And when I mean environment of safety, it's not about the safe place in terms of its bricks and mortars. It's about an individual feels free to fail. It is not a fear. So how do you do that? And I would say that the growing that culture within the organization will be key. And leaders have to embrace that culture by walking the talk and allowing some failure to take place when you create. Now, you must have heard this dialogue or word called sandbox, which is again heavily used in many industries, including banking, where you create that environment where you play with data, you play with things and you prototype and not disrupting your mainstream of business. So when you see the results and it is stable, then you bring it to mainstream. So I would say that it's a combination and it's a thin line, and each organization is at a different stages of that journey.
Thanks, Osman. I think my takeaway on this is that beanbags and innovation labs cannot sort of drive the innovation on its own. It really needs to be supported by a culture where you can truly test, fail fast, fail small, and sort of breed the next big thing. Thank you for that. And coming back onto the last trend, which is on geopolitical issues, we saved the best for last for YCOC. 97% of CEOs have changed their investment strategy in response to geopolitical challenges. And almost a third have already halted their projects. CEOs are re-examining their global footprint, operations, assets, addressable markets through a geopolitical lens. And what we're seeing now is that in the coming sort of trends, according to EY, 78% of CEOs will now look to conduct mergers and acquisitions in countries where geopolitically and economically are more aligned with their home country. So as a result of these geopolitical challenges, these are some of the steps the CEOs are now taking to alter their investment plans. First, we've just heard delaying planned investments. Second, reconfigure, renegotiate your supply chains. Third, relocate operational assets. And fourth, really consider existing specific markets. Again, what needs to kind of differ from there. And the light of the pandemic, naturally, that sort of work anywhere notion sort of really opened up to new talent strategy. And globally, employers rely on foreign talent in facing tighter eligibility requirements. For those in Singapore, I'm sure this resonates. For work authorizations, more intense scrutiny, and increased compliance enforcement. And really, this is due to stronger protectionism, anti-foreign worker sentiment, and rising national sovereignty. So, question to you, YCOC. With respect to location of Asian headquarters and the shift from Hong Kong to Singapore, as we've seen from the recent The Economist article, what impact is this having, if any, on the Singapore office market?
Yeah, certainly. We over the past 2 years, we can see the intense environment, business environment between Hong Kong and China. Certainly, we see a shift. But what we see in the Singapore market, rather than a total shift a total relocation of the headquarters to Singapore, what we see is a shift of the management team. So meaning the senior management team could be based in Hong Kong previously, and right now they decided to move that management team to Singapore. So in that aspect, I don't see a huge impact to the real estate landscape. Yes, there are some clients who wanted to expand the office to accommodate that increase in headcount, but it's not a major impact. It's not a huge expansion plan, what we see so far. To that point, I think some other companies are also taking the opportunity while relocating the senior management team to Singapore. They want to also introduce hybrid working and into the overall redesign of the office space. So they managed to achieve both the objective, having a new management team in place in a new location, at the same time, hopefully introduce a new hybrid culture within the organization. So what we see, yes, there's a change in some design parameters, but not major.
Thanks, Wyckoff. And with the effects of political instability and lack of infrastructure in the Asia region, what are your clients doing with office space outside of Singapore?
For other Asian markets, yes, you're right, Narita. Some of the infrastructures are lacking, but it all depends on what are the critical factors that affect a company when they want to set up an office in some of these regions. All right, it could be looking for talent that couldn't be found in Singapore, or they could be looking for cost-saving options, or they could be looking for materials and resources that are not available in Singapore. So all this play a great critical role in deciding where to locate an office. In some of this Southeast Asia markets, we don't see a huge take-up in office space. We see satellite offices and still using Singapore as a hub, where the management team, where decisions making are still taking place in Singapore. And some of this smaller office will act as a hub to enable some of their trading activities to take place.
Thank you, Wyckoff. And as we come to a close on this session, I think there are 3 key takeaways we'd like to summarize in those incredible insights from our speakers on how do we accelerate performance. So action number 1, reassessing strategic assumptions. Easier said than done. Prioritizing growth opportunities, learning to let go of legacy SOP policies because speed and agility is going to be key. So how are you going to create and streamline inefficiencies? We talked a little bit around how to embrace a data-driven culture for innovation. So perhaps in letting go, perhaps data will start to tell us, help us inform what decisions we need to take. Because by nature, we are creatures of emotions and may not see beyond what's quite obvious. And last but not least, review supply chains, pricing strategies. Great time to be renegotiating contracts to kind of really peg your expenses. All right, action 2, strengthening your balance sheet. I think we all know this. And in the short term, how do you reduce the operating costs? Obviously, diversify your portfolio with rising prices, and obviously, again, continue to invest in skills for employee upskilling. But more importantly, while you're taking all those measures to reduce and preserve costs in the short term, don't take your eyes off the more important thing, which is where are you investing as well to ensure that when the economy begins to turn more favorably, you're there to pick up the wave. Recessions come, recessions go. It is the companies who prepare for when recessions sort of passed and then they want to take that sort of wave, this is where you need to think about where those investments will take you there. And last but not least, obviously, sandboxing the future is key, right? Because we have traditional sort of incomes today. We really think about new revenue streams. And to paraphrase Osman, how do you think about maintaining your core business, so your key revenue generators stay, and then create that culture of innovation to prosper your sandbox, right? Is it about creating a different division where they just go and test new things and see what comes out of that, because they're not sort of stuck in the BAU firefighting mode, because it's really hard to do both? Or could it be an external collaboration, again, a different angle, and then plugging into your sort of existing infrastructure? And I think it's easier said than done, but don't be afraid of failure. Without failure, there is no success. All right. So on that note, what's next? All right. As we said, it's the beginning, the first of our Strategic Insights series. And so our next event will be held on the 23rd of August. Please join us there. We will be mailing you, for all participants, a copy of the slides, the recording, and the 3 key takeaways. Please do follow us on our social media channels. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, for those who, if some of these topics have resonated, book a meeting with us to explore how we could accelerate your business performance with you. All right, and on that note, we're at the last segment, which is on questions and answers. And some interesting questions have come forth. I'm going to brave the first question, and it asks, how is Paperspace Asia preparing for the recession? Wow, talk about putting me on the horse's seat. Well, I think that when I kind of like to take us back 3 years ago, I think that even when the pandemic started, I don't think we sat around waiting for something to happen. I think we naturally just said, we've got time, let's try different things. And I think that started the culture of innovation for us. And sort of questioning and running projects, really, not saying, oh, I've done this, I've done that, but really running a project. We want to achieve these 3 things. These are some inefficiencies. Can we make it smarter, easier, cheaper, right? What's the goal? And that's what we started off with. It was very simple, faster, cheaper, because that's what our clients demand. So we started off, it was very sort of low-key, and we tested it, it kind of worked. We're probably at version 2.2 right now, and it has been one of our major revenue generators. But what's really key in that is that it could not have just been, oh, you young, very, very cool analytics people, go do it and then show me. I don't think that really worked. I think we had to do the project with them because we understood what the customer demand was. They could look at the way we do things differently, and the 2 things had to come together. I think one without the other would never really sort of thrive because we never take it out to the customer. So taking all these ideas to the customer, testing small, failing small, giving it away for free in the beginning is the way that you start to sort of see whether your sandbox is going to work. I think the second question around, it's an interesting one, is how can the voice of employees steer or inform the workplace approach? Wow, empowerment in full throttle. This is again a very timely and appropriate question because in steering the future, it cannot be pyramidal in sort of one person dictating what that is. Be it your strategy of markets, be it your investments, with your financial team, be it your HR strategies, your learning development teams, or be it what should our office be? Should we downsize? Should we go to a cheaper place? Should we shut it and just do, remote working? I think the point is these have to be in conversation with the different task force to realize what each country's needs are and then the nuanced business cases are. But the most important thing of all, do not turn your eyes into your navel and sort of say, what should we do? Turn your eyes on the customer. Ask your customer what is pressing for them. What is pressing for them, what solutions they need, will then drive your strategies into how you respond. All right? And I guess that on that note, we've got one more question. Oh, we've got new questions coming through. Ooh, how do we, okay, there's a question here that's interesting. How do we bridge gaps between employees and management in terms of innovation? Getting feedback on the ground is definitely important as the main users for technology and innovation. However, most large-scale changes within an organization are driven or initiated by senior management. Okay, so I'm going to tackle this last question before my team gives me the cutoff, and I'll try to do it as quick as possible. Once upon a time, we used to do like workplace projects where we sit with the C-suite and say, what do you imagine the workplaces to be? And today, I think the conversations with leadership is, what is the vision of your office? What do you see as successful? These are the two questions we need. That's it. Okay? What it should look like, what it should feel like, what it should sort of be part of. I think it has to be a ground-up co-creation development. And why is that important? It's not just what's the ground-up saying. What are the mid-managers thinking about? And I think when you kind of take a good 10% of the organization on a specific subject with a vision in mind, I think that's where you bring vision into sort of tactical steps together. And I think the same goes for innovation as well. For all you leaders out there, if you're driving these initiatives, please figure out a way where the common conversation around the problem statement is clear. Without a problem statement, without clarity of what problem you're trying to solve, it could go in circles. And so we, at Paperspace and our clients, always define what is your top 3 goals. If you can solve 3 goals, you've already moved the needle point. Okay, these are very, very challenging, interesting questions, guys. Just keep them rolling. All right, we have a question for Sheela. Unfortunately, Sheila's in a full day training, but we are surely going to send this question to Sheela after this and get her to respond possibly in our next webinar. And the question is, besides building structures and systems for the whole organization, what exactly are the strategies of the leaders themselves for their own mental well-being? This is an extremely important question because it's a bit like being on the plane, really, and they say, put the mask on yourself, and then you can put the mask on the other person, and I think this is really important. I think leaders need to be in the right headspace and demonstrate, really, what the epitome of living right looks like. I think then, naturally, people sort of look to them to kind of exhibit those qualities. But I'm not the subject matter on this, so I will definitely take this up to Sheela, and we will definitely sort of return that response to you. Okay, I'll take maybe one last question. This question is around, how will I know that a new approach would even work for my new organization? Yes, you're right. I think this is where I would say sort of once upon a time, we could use past data of like 10 years maybe, and we have a lens of like what a month looks like, and we kind of forecast because nothing really changed. Today, you heard what I said. Just he only shared 3 examples, right? People cutting costs 100%, going to cheaper places, trying to hybrid it, but don't know if it's going to be sustainable. Then there's like a third version, which is, what this sort of semi-remote work environment will be. I think there is no perfection. Don't work towards perfection. Work along principles and foundations. What are you trying to achieve? Again, top 3. Test small, pilot it, but be clear on your objectives and be clear on how you're going to measure it. So we've heard a lot of, we're doing this pilot, the space looks great. And I say, yeah, but how do you know it's successful? So how do you know what are you going to take in the pilot to put in the final? And I think maybe think about that as your sandboxing. When you're trying to start something, we know we want to engage people, we know we want them to be excited, but when everybody is crystal clear on what our goals and objectives are, we will then be able to ask the questions, have we solved the problem statement? All right, so that's really in its simplicity. All right, So on that note, thank you very much, audiences, for staying with us throughout. We're so excited to have our very first session and look forward to see you on the 23rd of August. I do want to say big thanks to an amazing crew behind all this who've been phenomenal in putting this together. Thank you.